Good afternoon. Welcome. It is September the 15th, 2022. We've made it almost through 3/4 of the year, not quite. This is the second to last show before I disappear off to Europe to go mountain biking. So you may never see me again after that. But it's THCB Gang. I'm Matthew Holt, the publisher of THCB, your host at Bolt TV on the Twitters. Great lineup with a bunch of my regular favorites. John of Neptune from Suntra Modern Recovery and the Is It Serious podcast. Vince Kuraitis, these days platform specialist, Michael Millenson, president of Health Quality Advisors, Casey Quinlan, who is back in from the oncologist office this morning with the Healthcare Hilarious podcast, and back off a summer touring around the national parks of America, Rosemarie Day, the CEO of Day Health Strategies. All right. So we could start with how are we all, but I dare not do that because Casey everybody has too much to tell us. Anyway, but let's do that quickly. How have we all been? It's been a while since some of you've been on, and I know we ran. So why don't we start with you and then tell us a bit about what you've been thinking and been up to. Why don't we start with you? As you've been out for a while now, Rosemarie. Rosemarie, good to have you back.
All right. Well, actually, I will give a plug to the national parks. I was able to spend the end of August in Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons. Yellowstone's celebrating its sesquicentennial. That's 150th anniversary. Lots. Still hard to find Wi-Fi and cell coverage in some spots. If you're looking for a place that offers you those benefits, that is certainly one of them. But it was wildly restorative for me, and part of it was just that I think it was really good for me to be in a place that while it is in red states, it was not politicized. And in fact, it just felt like the national parks draw people, particularly those like something like Yellowstone, people from all over the world and the country who are coming to genuinely be together to see amazing sights, including herds of buffalo and things that just were kind of unifying in a humanity kind of way, and just natural wonder, and something that I think I sometimes lose sight of when I'm sitting here in my urban jungle, on shows like this, thinking about everything that's going wrong and how polarized we were, to actually physically be somewhere in a space that kind of looks like what Vince has got as his background was just extremely restorative. So I'm very happy to report that and recommend it highly.
Fantastic. Yeah, excellent. Vince, you're clearly already in, the Idaho National Forest.
Yeah. Hey, I got to piggyback off of what Rosemarie said. You were close to Jackson Hole, which is probably a blue enclave within the red state of Wyoming. And if you are looking for places where there is no cell coverage, you ought to come to Idaho too. We got lots of that. So I will share a quick story. You've probably all heard the punchline, but I hope I can put a little color behind it that may make it more memorable. I was listening to a podcast, and the podcast was with Harvey Finkelstein, who is the president of Shopify, and he made a statement saying, think about how you think about television. Back when TV was founded, we used to make a distinction between color TV and black and white TV. But today it's just TV. And no one says, color TV. Everyone's got just color TV. And I look forward to the day when we think about healthcare in the same way, when it's not virtual care and in-person care, it's just healthcare. And I hope that the color TV analogy shows the inevitability of that direction. Thanks, Matthew.
Marvelous. Joel, I'm sure you've never been to a national park because they haven't got one on Manhattan Island and never left the island. So maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Well, it's funny that you say that, Matthew, because I am not a camping guy. I'm a beach guy. So we just did a week of vacation in Block Island and off of Rhode Island. So I'm more of a beach guy than a woods guy, but I can still appreciate the Yellowstone. Would like to go there at some point. In terms of what I found interesting this week was the president's announcement of the Cancer Moonshot. I thought that was pretty cool. And I think that there were many, many very significant initiatives that are tied up into that Cancer Moonshot. It touches some people that we know. Steve Krein and Unity Stokes over at Startup Health, I think, are tangentially involved. They actually had a cancer moonshot part of their business before this was announced. But I think it's interesting for the president to focus on a particular disease that he is obviously connected to through the death of his son, and to really try to work on, I think the subtext here is trying to figure out some way that we can unify the country, right? It's going to be difficult with these January 6th hearings. It's going to be difficult with all the other stuff that's going on. It's going to be difficult with the midterms. But I do believe that part of what's happening with this cancer moonshot is really, I think, an attempt by the president to say, hey, listen, we may have all of our different political beliefs, but everybody knows somebody who's been involved, affected by cancer. And what we can do is maybe rally around cancer and trying to find a solution to this big problem as a country. So I thought that was interesting, and I think maybe not as obvious as it appeared to be in terms of what he was actually announcing.
Yeah, interesting. That was a great Bill. I don't always like him. Great Bill Maher piece about, would the country really unify if the Martians came down and attacked, or would the red state Republicans say, "Oh, they wiped out DC and New Jersey. That's fine." Anyway, Casey.
Yeah, well, I've sort of been living the, the healthcare experience. For those who haven't been paying attention, I have stage 4 cancer now, as of last year. But, I'm just sort of trying to stay alive and witnessing in real time some of the successes and failures of the U.S. healthcare system, or just science in general. It's not as though I'm the only one having this problem, or it's an exclusively American problem, or, I was delighted to see Biden returning to his cancer moonshot roots, so to speak. And a number of my friends were at that launch meeting, including Alicia Staley and some other folks that I know pretty well. But, on the ground, it still is, it's hard. My favorite thing that happened in the last, this month, my September hospitalization, because there was an August one, and then there was a September one, was being told that the reason I was being hospitalized was that my blood calcium level was too high, and they couldn't give me the medicine that would lower my blood calcium because my blood calcium was too high. That was the whole explanation. And I'm like in the top 1% of people who get told things by doctors. And I'm like top 1%. I actually understand most of what they say, but that one like completely failed the logic filter pass through. I was like, I'm sorry, but that doesn't make any sense to me. Could you please explain again? And they just kept saying the same thing. And I got to stay in the hospital for 5 days. So yay me, or something. But it's just, they haven't gotten it right. Not as though anybody else is getting it right, but there are opportunities to get it right. And I am definitely in favor of looking for those opportunities and taking advantage of them. So, and then on my radar, outside of the personal, I am amused that the virus that seems to have afflicted the United States, i.e., we really think the government should tell women what to do with their bodies, seems to be spreading. We now have Hungary doing all kinds of interesting crap around telling women what they can and cannot do with their reproductive system. And hilariously, not too far from me, I could drive there relatively quickly. In Virginia, the state where I live, is relatively open when it comes to abortion rights. And Tennessee, which is a neighboring state, is not. And an abortion clinic in Tennessee moved literally down the street, literally from right over there, to Bristol, Virginia, so that they could continue to offer services. It was a bit of a logistical nightmare too, to try to do all the things, check all the boxes around certifications and licensure, insurance, all that jazz. But it was just amusing to me that even just a mile or so down the road, you ended up with all the same hoo-ha that you deal with when you're trying to do anything medical and suddenly a state line shows up. It's just interesting to me. So that's me.
Well, we continue to wish you all the best and hope that you stay out of the hospital. And fingers remain crossed as you go down the path. Michael.
Well, I've been puzzled that no one is addressing the global medical mystery, which is, how did Queen Elizabeth die?
Oh, there's a conspiracy.
Just to be clear, Liz Truss sees her on a Tuesday. She's healthy enough to say hello. On Thursday, she falls sick. On Friday, she dies. Now, maybe I've been reading too many fairy tales, but does anybody look for a poisoned apple?
Died on Thursday. She did not die on Friday.
She died on Thursday.
Okay, the poisoned apple. I'm a little disappointed that simply saying she died of natural causes, and maybe for a queen, a poisoned apple is natural causes. But I'm just a little disappointed that no one has investigated that.
Look, speaking as an expert on the British monarchy, which everyone seems to think I am, because the amount of people said to me, "We're so sorry about your queen dying." I did sit next to her youngest son in a lecture once at Cambridge, so I'm very closely associated with her.
Okay.
And he knew a girl who was a friend of mine at Cambridge, so I'm there. Yeah, I'm close enough. But there is a theory that so she died young, right? Her mother lasted till she was 101. Her husband lasted till he was 99. They obviously have good breeding stock in them. These Hanoverians, and she snuffed it at 96. So there was a theory that she had COVID last year. There's a theory that the long COVID impact on heart disease or whatever. But yeah, apparently she was. The other way to look at it is that she was just determined to stay on until she could get rid of Boris Johnson. So he goes up to Balmoral and gets kicked out on the Monday. Liz Truss goes up to get signed on and do the whatever on the Tuesday. And it's all good and well and good. And it was probably pretty unexpected because talking about and aristocratic rulers, one of the Bushes, Jenna Bush Hagen, I think is the one. One of the Bush twins, George W. Bush's daughters, was interviewing Charles and Camilla on the Thursday and was at their house waiting for them to show up. And then they all of a sudden, bang, that you have to get out, they're gone. They got in a helicopter and left. So it was not like, she was lying on her deathbed. It was like all of a sudden, bang, she's about to go. And they all had to, they had to rush out of there. So it was kind of unexpected. And
a quick interjection here. I heard she did not want to have Donald Trump at her funeral explicitly.
Yeah, no, he's not invited.
So she was like every American president or senior political figure who's died in the last 30 years.
And I'm trying to think of the seating. Yeah, you can put the Americans up front, but then you put the Commonwealth nations in front of in front of France. Tough. So the seating chart is going to be pretty tough. And speaking of the abortion, so this is a week where we've seen religion and health, right? So for abortion, my religion should do things. For the judge in Fort Worth who said that mandating coverage of HIV medication violates the religious beliefs of people who don't want anything to do with gay people. Unbelievable. Now, I lived in Fort Worth where you have bumper stickers that say God said it and that does it. But really, talk about the stretch. We are like separation of church and state. Of course, with people who don't want to get vaccines, even if they're a nurse, because I guess, let me think of this. I'm pro-life, but I don't want to be vaccinated, even if that kills somebody else, because it's my individual freedom. But interestingly, this is the same Supreme Court that when they were sued about starting prayers, just something with starting prayers in public places meant saying in the name of Jesus Christ, they said that's okay. So I believe their protection of religious liberty, just a guess here, maybe somewhat one-sided. And I'm waiting for the Islamic coalition that takes its case up to the Supreme Court and talks about not having halal meat available and to see how Justice Thomas rules. So we've got religion mixed in with health. What we should say is, just one last thing on that. To be fair, we have an example of religion mixed in with health that is not as well known now, and that is that Medicare covers Christian Science healing centers.
Oh, I did not know that.
Why does Medicare cover Christian Science? Because Senator Edward Kennedy of Massachusetts was a very powerful guy for a long time, and that's where the Christian Science Church is headquartered. Just like the FDA does not regulate vitamin supplements, because Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah was a very powerful guy for a long time. So that just says that America's religion, that we can all, you talked about how we can all unite, Rosemarie. I think we can all unite about money buying influence in politics. I think all Americans can unite around the belief that everyone has the right to buy their own senator, no matter what your religion is.
Oh my gosh.
No, apparently true. And apparently if you want to divert, funds for the needy to a volleyball court, it helps.
Oh my.
You're saying buying senators is bipartisan?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, you saw that training scandal, right? I mean, so Vince, my favorite example of that in healthcare is in St. Louis. Barnes Jewish Christian is a merger of Barnes, which is university Jewish and Christian. And what unites all of them? A belief in green.
That is the
great country.
That is the Judeo-Christian health system uniting in one place.
Matthew, if I may,
yeah, please.
You mentioned the needy. I was excited to read New York Times headline this week that there has been a quiet but dramatic blow to childhood poverty. And I went to graduate school to actually work on this issue some 3 decades ago.
How come it's not fixed?
Well, there's still too many kids who are poor, but it is the lowest level that it's been in decades, and it's been addressed kind of in a multifaceted way, which did include some of the welfare to work stuff, but it also included building the safety net. And I've, in my career, been working on both elements of that, so that if you do go to work, there would still be some health care. There would be earned income tax credit. There would be all kinds of things that actually keep people from being poor. So it's not just the COVID related subsidies. It's an infrastructure that has been building over time. And there was some consensus, at least pre-Trump, that we should take care of kids. So that's a not usually headline news. And I just thought it's worth noting.
Well, and wasn't the point, I mean, how much of that is connected to an income tax credit supplement or whatever it was that was then cut off and didn't get continued, and I'm worried about that. And then, of course, how much more is important that that should go to volleyball courts in Mississippi? Then, for those who hadn't seen, Brett Favre got in some trouble because he managed to, with the mayor, the then governor of Mississippi,
some number of millions for speeches he didn't give.
Yeah, well, I mean, and then it was money that was he could. I mean, Brett Favre being a poor guy, having only signed how much JL, $50 to $100 million in contracts over his playing career, probably not more, could barely afford
the Brett Favre's copper fit money alone has got to be hundreds of millions of dollars, right? I mean,
anyway, well, that's a good Southern politics for you. I wanted to bring up one thing which didn't get mentioned yet, because this week, actually, it was early last week, last time we were on, CBS bought Signify Health. Most important thing about Signify Health is it's majority owned by Matthew Holt. The second most important thing is it's not me, it's another guy called Matthew Holt. So the $8 billion they got in, of which he owns 60% from his new mountain capital, unfortunately is not residing anywhere close to here. But Jessica Massa will frequently explain how she's looking to upgrade her partner on health tech deals without changing the guy's name, and keeps on sending implores and emails. But it's interesting because, and I wrote a bit about this in the newsletter, which were and on THCB, which was that most of what Signify does now did actually by a company called Remedy Partners. So I don't recall, JF, where they were part of Blueprint at one point, but they were Matt Wiggins and those guys. That was a bundle payments thing, and they got rid of that, and they took a big charge against them about that just before they sold it. What they were left with a bunch of nurses who go out to patients' homes to assess them for their Medicare Advantage plans. And this is, deep in the heart of this controversial thing is, are they upcoding unnecessarily, and this means the Medicare Advantage plans are charging more than they should be for the same patients? Are they instead, finding stuff that they can catch early and therefore, delivering better care at a lower cost to these Medicare Advantage members, et cetera, et cetera. Continues to be a lot of fuss about this both ways. I've now looked at it because George Halverson has been publishing on THCB about this, and I've been both sort of rewriting his stuff and also trying to look into what's going on there. There is a big dispute about the actual numbers, depending if you believe MedPAC, which is the advisory commission, or the CMS to Medicare, or the CMS trustees. They actually both publish completely different numbers about whether Medicare Advantage is costing more or costing less, and whether this upcoding is real or not real. And what Halverson says, and it's backed up by the regulations, but I don't know if it's actually enforced in practice, is that currently CMS is not allowing upcoding to be done unless it's reflected in the actual medical record activity of the patient. So if you go in and you have a test at the physician's office and it says, yeah, you have diabetes and you didn't before, then you can be changed in the risk piece, and the health plan, and the provider can get an extra payment in Medicare Advantage. But if someone goes to your house who's not a physician and sort of says, oh, I think this person has whatever condition more than they have, that apparently is now not counted by CMS as to go into the code that delivers whatever the capitated rate is. The then question is, well, why the hell would CBS Aetna buy a company that goes and looks at these people if they're not going to be able to sort of generate an increase in the risk adjustment factor, the RAF? And then the other question I raised is that, and will the rest of Signify's clients, who are Humana, United, or the Blues plans, etc., who've been using them for the same purpose, will they believe whatever is coming out of something that's now owned by one of their chief rivals? So, is that a good deal or not? We'll find out. But there was certainly a bidding war, and interesting enough that the other people in the bidding war were United and Amazon, allegedly, although some people are now saying that Amazon was just in the bidding war to make sure that CBS paid more, but who knows? But it's an interesting deal, and a non-trivial one. A company was doing under $1 billion in revenue. Well, it was doing about 600 million last year, about $1 billion. They got $8 billion for it, which in today's stock market at 8 times revenues, and it's hard to tell their profit because they took this big charge last year, but probably 30 to 50 times profit is real money. So that was an interesting one. I think the argument about Medicare Advantage and is it cost saving or cost neutral, or cost going up, and is value-based care connected to it working, is going to run and run. There was some discussion about this at the Rock Health Summit I went to yesterday, about whether plans really cared about that, and how much of healthcare is going via value-based care initiatives. Is it 5%? Is it 30%? And how do you define value-based care compared to fee-for-service and all that stuff? So I know we've discussed that ad nauseam here on THCB going. Anytime we get health policy people and health business people together, we talk about that a lot. But I think that is we had a big deal in the markets, the last week because of that. Anyway.
So can I offer a perspective? So what I'll put this out as
you've been on the show enough.
All right, I'm just gonna butt in. I'll offer a hypothesis. It's not strong enough to really make it as a statement, but we've been trying to get health systems to take on risk for a decade with very mixed results, and so I'm seeing this new coalition forming of big tech and big retail and payers and physicians. All of whom seem to now believe, and you look at some of these acquisitions, you're the one you mentioned, but this nascent coalition being able to push risk, and the delivery systems may be just pushed to the back end here. They may become commoditized.
Vince,
Michael, go on.
when I wrote Demanding Medical Excellence, I talked about the fact that if doctors didn't take on measuring quality and stuff, they would become commoditized. And what I wonder about, though, when I thought it was a very insightful observation that you made about them pushing risk. And then I thought to myself, when people were against capitation, they weren't against capitation per se, they're against capitation a certain amount of money per month, right? And the doctors say, well, you're not paying me enough, right? And the argument over Medicare Advantage is not over whether it's good to have a risk-bearing organization, but the fact that they've for years been able to get a sweetheart deal. And then the question is, as big tech and all these people take on risk, is that going to achieve what those of us who thought the economics could be used to push out waste want to achieve? Or is it going to go back to my halfway tongue-in-cheek remark at the beginning of the show? They now have enough money to buy enough senators and congressmen that the level of payment to them puts the risk on the U.S. taxpayer and others, right? I mean, all of us have assumed that taking on risk is a way to squeeze out waste. It may be a way to squeeze out certain people's waste and have the profits, harvested by other people. So that would be something to watch.
There's actually some data about exactly that point this week. Well, not the squeezing out the congressman part, but the other side. So there was an article written in JAMA, came out Monday this week, I think, which I may have been earlier, maybe last week, that I highlighted on Twitter. And it was from Humana, who had done a fair amount of research on their Medicare Advantage populations, and it was looking at the number of unnecessary low value, right?
Yeah.
And the headline was great. Medicare Advantage has 9.5% fewer unnecessary care incidents than traditional fee-for-service Medicare. Isn't that great? Then you looked at the actual numbers. There were 25 incidents per 100 member enrollees, people in Medicare, for traditional Medicare. And there was 25.6 or something. And there was 23.1 for Medicare Advantage, which, it's 9% less than, it's a little under 10% less, but it's 2 and a bit per 100 less, which when you say it that way sounds a hell of a lot, less significant than 10%. And you're going, if traditional Medicare is so bad, and it's got so much, of the waste that you wrote about 28 years ago, whatever now it is, Michael.
25 years ago in October, unfortunately.
25 years ago. So coming up for the anniversary, you should do a special. Yeah. Why isn't it down at like 3 parts? I kind of remember when I forget what it was, but back in the 80s, that book, The Reckoning, David Halberstam wrote about Nissan and Ford and Toyota and General.
Right.
General Motors had 13 defects per car and very cleverly got it down to 7. And Toyota was at 1 and got it down to 0.3 or something. Going, shouldn't you be able to do a lot better than getting down to 7?
That's the problem with all these people who say, well, price transparency will do it. Fine. I can always order a couple of extra tests before if I got to cut the price of my heart procedure, well, let's order that chest X-ray and a couple of other things, right?
But we've all agreed, I think, the fundamental problem in healthcare, the big one, is really around price. I mean, that's when you compare us to other countries in the world, we charge more. So take my thesis of, the world is coming to a coalition in better managing risk, potentially commoditizing hospitals where the prices are high. And so if you can commoditize hospitals, you get a better price. That may be where this is all heading.
So Vince, the thing that I struggle with that is because I do quality, right? There's an old joke: price, cost, access, quality, choose two, right? Yeah. And in theory, risk-based payment would cause large entities to institute ways of getting cost-effective care that's high quality, because we'll do the most effective treatment because it gets you well quicker and will be safe. That's the theory.
Agreed. There's holes there.
And if we just attract price without specifically measuring some of those other things, I worry that we won't get what in theory we should. And because we're not measuring, and the price people, so you can make the example about cars or whatever, but it really doesn't matter that much between budget and Hertz and Avis or whatever. It does matter in your experience, but car is the same. On the other hand, and people say, well, x-rays, but get away from x-rays and start talking about procedures, right? I mean, I doubt, Casey, whether you would go shopping for your oncology treatment based solely on price without any other information.
No, and hilariously, one of the things that I will observe, I've been thinking about this as you guys have been talking about cost, is I aged into Medicare and I elected original Medicare, old style A and B with a Medicare supplement, a Medigap supplement, and a Part D. Everybody has to have a Part D. And I have stage 4 cancer, as I mentioned before, but I have not seen, she said, knocking on wood, I have not seen Bill 1 for anything yet. And I mean, it's been a year and some, so I don't imagine that I will be seeing a bill anytime this week or this month or whatever. I am a little curious. I do get some traffic from the major insurance company that provides my Medigap, but it's not, that's not super alarming to me. And, they get their slice and okay, fine. I mean, the only time that I felt like I was standing on slightly shaky ground was when I demanded last year, after my hospitalization, that I be sent home in an ambulance versus just told, here, we'll wheel you down to, the car your sister drives and put you in that and away you will go. And I was like, no, I don't think I want to tackle those stairs, the 6 concrete stairs leading up to the front door of my apartment building. I think I want to ride up that in a gurney chair thing, something, that actually preserves me from doing a face plant on concrete. How you feel about that? And they were like, well, that actually does make sense. And it's like, okay, fine. So let's do it. And so that's what we did. And I did not fall on my front steps. And since then, again, I was told by the discharge lady, oh, you're going to get a big bill. And I said, what's your definition of a big bill? And she said, well, $600. I'm like, I can pay that, $600, I can pay that. And I never got a bill for $600, even 60 or 6,000, whatever. But it's just, to me, the cost, when the cost is important, no one can tell you what it is. And when it's less important, suddenly they all have numbers for you. And I'm just a little, sort of, I don't know, amused by that, something. I'm not sure what the word is I'm looking for, but it's definitely amusing that that the system thinks, or the people who are on the system side think that my price sensitivity is at $600 for an ambulance that I wanted. And the answer is no, that's not the case here. So what people don't understand on the cost of care side, I think, is that they see these huge bills, surprise billing, laws about surprise billing, other problems, other issues. And they see these big bills for things like cancer treatment, et cetera. But they end up conflating some of the big bills that they do see that get negotiated down for whatever reason. And then some of the other big bills that arrive for, ER visits, radiology, and anesthesiology, et cetera, that are less prevalent, or at least less visible. So, I don't know. I don't have any wisdom here, but it does seem as though there's an awful lot of moving the cheese going on out there, and we could work on that. But, that's me.
I jump in and say, Casey, there's 2 things going on, right? One is, can you make it so that it matters to somebody like after deductible, right? So essentially, whatever you had in Medigap and in the deductibles, that's got long gone, right? And yes, it's great you're not seeing a bill, but it's for whoever is it paying the end, there's like a negotiation after the fact, or there's Medicare pricing or whatever after the fact. And then obviously in the pre-Medicare market, there's a lot of back and forth about that.
Yeah.
The commercial market.
Yep.
My sense is that, there are people attempting to say, can we get it so the consumer makes a choice based on the fact that the MRI machine down the street compared to the one at the fancy academic medical center is, cheaper, especially if you do it at 4:00 in the afternoon on Saturday or whatever, and can you somehow give them incentives to that where they get a cut of the savings or whatever? There are all these people trying to sort of play that off the back of the price transparency thing. But in general, that's been really heavy lifting, to do. The other thing is that you're putting, if you say you're going to put this on the back of the consumer, you're putting them in an unnatural place. And I liken this to something I'm going through right at the moment, not healthcare related, which is I'm having some renovation done in the kitchen. And, I am now like a pretty big expert. Again, I was about 15 years ago when I did a similar renovation on how much appliances cost, where to get the cheaper and better, marble countertop, and where to get the, how big, which are the different options of wood versus whatever, for the cabinets and all, and the flooring and what. So I know all this stuff. It's great. And I've kind of educated myself up to be that. And that's kind of like you going through the mechanics of cancer. In general, wouldn't it be great if there was somebody I completely trusted who'd already done this 1,000 times and, could get me through this? And it's a bit like, I kind of trust my contractor, nice guy, but in the end, the more time he spends, the more he's going to bill me. I don't trust any of the vendors selling me stuff. Wouldn't it be great if there was somebody somewhere you could really trust who'd been through this a lot, who'd got you the best price, the best quality, and the best whatever? And we were kind of hoping that might be, I don't know who, your advocate, your Capitated Medical Group, Kaiser, somebody.
You want a Grace Court of Honor for kitchens.
Well,
Exactly.
yeah, but I mean, Grace do it for everything, for everybody with, whatever condition. I don't know. It's possible.
Matthew, I talked to a vendor, a company called Potentiometrics, which looks at risk-adjusted outcomes by institution. They try to put in your personal symptoms and all the rest of that kind of stuff, and then give you somebody to be a navigator. The problem is that who's going to buy the service? The individual patient doesn't pay for it. The providers don't want to buy a service that helps you choose the best provider because they want a service that helps you choose them. And now that leaves you back. Do the insurers want to help you choose the best provider, or do they want to help you choose the one with whom they have the best contract?
Yep.
And then that leaves you back with your employer, who may want to do that, or maybe they want you to use only the person that's covered by, the health plan that gave them the best bid. And so you have something which essentially is a patient benefit. The patients don't know it exists. And who's the market for it? It should be that health plan that runs those wonderful ads, or your employer, as HR people say, people are our most important product, or whatever. But it's a problem about who pays for the knowledge. And
Matthew, I'll make the argument that I still think we're very far from understanding being able to communicate quality information in an actionable way to the consumer, right? And I would argue, if you come to a city like New York, where we have how many orthopedic surgery programs, I don't think a single one of those orthopedists could identify which program is the best program. They know which program has the highest NIH funding, right? They might know which orthopedic program works with the Yankees. They might know which orthopedic program does the highest number of cases. But in terms of being able to come up with real information about how much does the procedure actually cost, right? Not how much is charged, but how much does the procedure cost? What are the real complication rates in the short term and the long term? I don't think that there's anybody who can do that, even the most sophisticated people. So a lot of competition. And remember, I spent 3 years as an entrepreneur in residence at the Hospital for Special Surgery. So much of the competition amongst providers is about reputation. It's about woo-woo stuff up here that is very difficult to quantify.
So, JL, if you look, HSS took out a full page in the New York Times a few months ago about their quality report card. Mm-hmm. And I called them up on that just to see what they were saying. Then I talked to the physician who helped on that. Have you looked at that quality report card?
I saw the ad, and the quality report card, I think, was my question was, what's the data that backs this? What's the analysis that backs this? I don't know if I can believe this quality report card.
Right. It was interesting. They thought that was their competitive thing, and it's very nicely formatted. But of course, the data may be accurate, but it also may be cherry picked. Right?
Absolutely.
Like
and not just cherry picked, actively gamed, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's what happened. That's what happened with the cardiac, the cabbage mortality data,
yes,
right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
In New York, and then they actively gamed it. And in California, one of the fun things, Hal Luff, when the California started putting out data some years ago on cardiac, on heart bypass surgery, right, and cabbages, right, and one of the risk adjusters was age, okay, and folks discovered that the upper limit they chose was 120. And they chose that because actually there's something in the Bible where Moses dies at 120. The Jewish thing, may you live to be 120. So sort of tongue in cheek, they chose 120. Well, if you knew that, you could game the system by coding the age of your patients as 119. And then there was the political aspect to it, right? And this goes exactly what you're talking about, JL, is that was a government report. So they had to choose what's the intervals, like what's our confidence level, right? And so you ended up with 120 some hospitals or more than that doing heart bypass surgery, 5 above average and 3 below average. A little big, a politically neutral confidence. Don't want to get too many people mad at you. And so, what does that tell the public? Well, I mean, we're all, a couple of us are excellent, and maybe somewhere there's somebody who's not as good as all the rest of us are.
Right. And I'd say, God forbid, if I had to have surgery, the only way I would choose my surgeon is literally interviewing some people that I went to medical school with and asking them for maybe what they thought about this one particular person who may have been in their residency program 5 years ago.
Right. Exactly.
So there is one point. I was talking to Raj Agarwal, who hasn't been on the show for a while, and was going to try and come on this week, who was a bariatric surgeon, although he's now trying to do a sort of start. We were discussing, what would you do about this? And he said, look, the real point is, and we're talking about, could you put together a program for all obesity and combine all the kind of different diet all the way through stuff? But in the end, back to Vince's point about price commodity, he said it's actually remarkable in bariatric surgery. Most of the surgery is still done in big academic medical centers and costs, $50,000-$60,000 a throw. There are now a group of surgeons who are doing it for sort of, 10 to 15,000 out in the community. Seemed like their data and their outcomes seem to be just as good. And, one of the things that I think, we'll start to see happening is you're good enough. You're within the bands of average. And so we're going to start trying to push you to those lower price ones. Because I'm with Vince. I think in the end, the only thing we can agree about is the actual paid price. And we know that Medicare we know that employers are paying, and Ian Morris, every time he comes on the show and talks about it, it's a friend from the German health ministry going, what the fuck was that in German? About when he explains this, that they're still paying 250, employers are paying 250% of what Medicare is paying. So in a bunch of articles, Liz Mitchell from PBGH, Purchasers Business Group on Health it now is, and others writing articles saying, why, the cost shouldn't be much more than 140, 150%. Why are employers paying so much more? And to me, back to what is your employer going to do? What's the health plan going to do? None of this stuff matters much before we have a really serious recession in terms of unemployment, right? And right now we still have this big labor shortage. We discussed many times. We have the big labor shortage. We have, wages still going up, even not as fast as prices may be. And it's hard to imagine somebody coming out and really aggressively having a go at their employees, and wanting to move them around. But, we have seen that happen a few times over the years, over the decades, when we get into a sort of serious labor surplus, right? Recession the other way around. And one of those will show up at some point. And then I think the conversation about how much we're paying these hospital systems, the big academic centers, and, JL's talking about, the argument about who's the best while they're all putting up their prices year after year is really going to come home to roost. But it's not the argument we should be having, which is what's the best quality and price and cost effectiveness and the best outcomes long term for the patients with the best patient centricity and the and the most and the happiest and the happiest outcome, the happiest outcomes and all that stuff that we're never going to quite get there because how many?
Well,
I'll say 25 years later because of Michael's book.
How about this, Matthew?
Rosemary's got the solution. She's fixed child poverty earlier in the show, and now she's going to fix healthcare. Go on.
Well, given all of the COVID catastrophes for hospitals and their finances, I do wonder if the pressure could come from that direction, because there's a question as to how big can public bailouts be, or how much can insurers via employers paying insurers to pay hospitals make up for the deficits that they're facing and the huge crisis we're having in nurses covering what's needed and the pay raise demands that they're making, which maybe rightfully they should be earning more, but there's just a lot of hospitals are really getting squeezed. Is that actually going to be the point of reckoning?
Well, we've touched on this before. I'd love to hear the conversation. My gut is that there was real crisis for a bit of 2020, and then over the course of 22, particular, life is getting tougher as the nursing, the nursing shortage is really hitting them, and the cost of labor has gone up, and whether that's and you've heard me talk before about hedge funds that do hospital services on the side. There's still a lot of money sitting on the balance sheets of most of these big systems and the AMCs, so they can put up with it for a while. I don't know, but yeah, it has certainly been squeezed, and the results are not good at the moment. Does that mean that they're going to change what they do and somehow go and try and get a guaranteed contract? Right now they want to come back and put their prices up, right? Not talk about putting them down.
But I think they can also be, yes, they were the heroes and saviors in many respects, and there has to be kind of a reckoning and potentially some cost cutting somehow, and to not just say it's carte blanche, now that we're coming past COVID. I do think that's a point of leverage societally. It's tricky culturally right now just because of how much we desperately needed the hospitals, and they were, there's a lot of tough stories that came out of all that.
I'm not so sympathetic. I'm going to point to medical tourism, where we've all seen these statistics of where hospitals in Thailand or India can do a bypass surgery for 10% of what it costs in the U.S. I don't buy the boo-hoo.
I mean, I'm with you, but if you look at and who knows about the efficiency of the hospital overall and the rest of it. Although, we had Jeff Goldsmith on the show. Jeff will be saying, no, nobody can make it on Medicare. It's just the costs of doing business are more than you think.
And who are Jeff's clients? Hospitals?
Well, you can always play that game. But what I would say is that no question, the way they were working with nurse cost inflation, people cost inflation, nurse shortage going up. No question that they are losing operating margin compared to what was going on before in the last year and a half. I don't know how you get from that to saying we're going to cut costs overall, and until you get an impact with essentially, the cost going through. I think, Jill, I think you said your insurance went up 20% for next year or something. When that happens on a routine enough scale, and you get real squealing on the employer side, then you might have to see, to come back and can we get to some agreement? Maybe the agreement.
Well, I mean, so here's an example. I mean, this may be simplistic, but if you're the CFO, reporting to the board, right? At some point, if one area is causing a lot of cost pressure, and you can't just go run and get more money from somewhere else in a sustainable way, then you've got to look inside your house and say, are there costs we can cut, or are there service lines that we're going to need to let go of? Because maybe the hospital down the street, God forbid, is doing that, and we are going to need to let go of something that isn't as profitable anymore. It's not sustainable. I mean, I do think some of those conversations are happening.
But letting go of something that's not profitable is not the same thing as cutting costs by, like, say, cutting unnecessary procedures. I mean, one of the things that I've written about that's obscene for years is the business case for patient safety. And actually, you know, that's a thing that doesn't cause anybody embarrassment. Is it more profitable to cut medical errors? And sometimes yes, sometimes no. And so, I mean, I was talking to somebody, this is not a recent example, but you talk about profitability, someone who is the chief quality officer of a large healthcare system, and they were talking about cutting readmissions, right? Cut costs. And the CEO of one of the hospitals said, well, if we do that, that's a big source of our profits. And the CEO of the health system went with that CEO and not with the chief quality officer, who then had a lot of sense of security in their job, went to the board of directors quality committee and got it overruled. But not very many people would do that. And there are lots of stories like that. They're just not the ones that are told publicly. You know, so I think that cost pressure has to come from the employers, or what Vince said, you know, the kind of the contracts that make you do efficiency, because efficiency is not easy to do. Cutting costs by letting people go, or cutting wages, or cutting a service line is you know, those pesky maternity beds. That's much easier.
But what Rosemary's talking about eventually is the very un-American thing of doing, you know, regional rational planning. It's saying how many, you know, how many beds, how many cobalt, how many cobalt sort of what are those things called?
Stents.
Like, sorry?
Stents?
No, not stents. The nuclear cobalt thing that there was an arms war going on a couple of years ago between, you know, I mean, there had been none in the US, and then like both Scripps and Sharp in San Diego both bought one.
Oh,
there were enough patients for me to do half in the San Diego, to need half of one in San Diego, and now you had two, so everyone's getting these, you know, nuclear resonance, whatever things. So, you know,
some of the gamma stuff and
the
all
gamma,
that.
that's it, the gamma knife. So I mean, but we've and there's bizarrely a weird dispute in North Carolina right now where the hospitals will not accept Medicaid expansion, which would be good for them, because there was also insistence that they put in that they upgrade the CON, significant need regulations, which will try and stop them building more wings or doing the stuff. You know, that stuff, you know, it's a great idea, and it's how other people run their healthcare systems, and it's just never worked here, right? Even though the government pays for it all, and you'd think the government would want to rationally plan rational allocation of resources, you know, rational allocation of needs. And I think the word rationing is in the word rational.
That's the problem.
You know,
yeah, rationing is in there.
Rational.
Rationing is not the American way.
Taboo.
Matthew, state legislators are cheaper to buy than congressmen. Did you know that? That goes, yeah. When you're worried about your certificate, when I was a brand new healthcare reporter, I wrote a story about a very large and powerful healthcare system that had done something that was against the certificate of need, and was quickly educated as to no, that's not how things work around here. And the system took care of their getting what they needed, and that was that. Certificates of need are very political, unfortunately.
All right. Well, so we're getting kind of close to the end of our conversation here. So let's start wrapping it up. And we've gone in some odd directions today. We didn't get to a couple of the things. We didn't get to the Kumbaya sitting in the national park and all enjoying the trees and the rest of it. And they're all probably going to be closed down during government cutbacks anyway.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, but actually, I hope not, because I just earlier this year I bought a national park gold pass, so I can hopefully go to a few, because I went to a place where.
But you spent $80?
I spent the whole $80. Yes, I want to get my money's worth.
Okay.
I went to Jamestown, the first British colony in the US, which was, not much of a national park, but it is a national park, but it's only a small one. It was good for a rainy afternoon, but I'm hoping to go see some more. Anyway, how do you get me onto that topic, Rosemary? Anyway, let's but we do have, we have coming up some interesting stuff. JL mentioned that we haven't touched this at all, but there is, the midterms are on their way. I'm getting, instead of 1 text a day from various Democrats, I'm getting like 20 texts a day. I don't know how they got my damn. I think Obama gave them my number when I gave him my cell phone number so I could find out who his VP pick was in 2007 or 2008, I guess. But I'm getting 20, people a day begging me for money for all kinds of obscure races and what have you else. That's interesting the way it's playing out. And the unseen elephant in the room still is we still have, inflation picked up again. It's not like it almost, collapsed on this last month. We have the war in Ukraine maybe entering a new phase, but, certainly potential for a pretty grim winter coming out of that, especially in Europe. And then, the midterms, and there's this Trump fellow who apparently is, we have the Gen 6 committee, DOJ investigating the secret papers spread across the floor of Mar-a-Lago, et cetera, et cetera. We're getting towards the business end of the political season here, and there's got to be some implications on healthcare, not the least of which is, as you mentioned, Michael, what happens, with Dobbs and Roe v. Wade. So, some thoughts about that, and as your closing thought for everybody. So why don't I start with you, Vince?
Matthew, I'm going to end with a tribute to your physical prowess. Okay, bear with me here. So I tweeted about an AP survey, which I found rather amazing, saying 12% of Americans thought that the American health system was functioning very or extremely effectively. And my question was, who are these 12%? Kim Ballard chimed in saying, these are people who think they could beat a lion in a fight. And Matthew then chimed in saying, I could do that easy. And I don't know where he got it, but Kim came back with this survey saying 2% of Britons thought that they could beat a lion in a fight. So you're in the top 2%, Matthew.
6% of Americans thought they could beat a lion. You see, they compared the Brits. The Americans are much more optimistic about what they can do. But wasn't it something like 10% of British men thought they could get a game off Serena Williams? Yeah, and that was more than the number of British men who actually played tennis.
Oh my God.
Yes, my physical prowess. I am going on an extreme mountain biking vacation in a week and a half in France, so my physical prowess will be put to the test, and I'm a bit nervous about that.
Watch out for lions.
Yes, look out for lions.
I'll look out for lions on the path. There are more lions where I live today than there are in France, I think.
Yes, mountain variety, yes.
Mountain variety, but kill the old person now and again. JL.
Just speaking of midterms, I think Dobbs is going to turn out to be a bomb that was unintentionally blown up on the Republicans. Like I think that they didn't really think through what might happen and how people might be energized. Women might be energized. People on the left might be energized. So I think Dobbs is going to have a huge impact, and I think we're maybe underestimating the impact of the January 6th hearings that begin again on the 28th of this month. And I think that you start combining those things. I think Democrats are going to hold the House. I think Democrats are going to hold the Senate. I think the political environment is going to continue to be unstable for a long period of time. And until the indictments for whoever was involved in January 6th at the top come through, I think there's going to just continue to be this undercurrent of uncertainty.
Do you think that the indictments are going to have to happen soon? Because, how much can this be shut down if they do lose the House in early January?
Good question. I think the indictments, I don't know. I'm not in the DOJ. I'm not Merrick Garland, but it feels to me like the pace is quickening almost, and certainly, you hear about Mike Lindell's phone was seized the other day. Epstein's phone was seized the other day. All these other people are having things happen to them that implies that the pace of the prosecution is quickening, right? And I don't know, maybe the indictments come out before the midterms. I'm not sure though.
Rosemarie.
It's actually being called Rovember in some circles. So I think that is one to watch. I love it because it was a pretty depressing start to the summer. I will say that. But when I looked at what happened in Kansas and how many new women registered to vote that is a force that was not predicted before this. So it's a power struggle. So there's that. And then I would also just say, that Inflation Reduction Act, so-called, which extended the subsidies on the ACA exchanges. I would be remiss not to note that, because that was one of those things that was held up there. If the Democrats can't get that done, the midterms are lost to them. But they did get it done. And so those subsidies are extended until the end of 2024. And that's a really big deal.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of legislation has got done in the last 18 months, despite all the wars and fights that have been. Not everything you wanted, but lots got done. Casey.
Yeah, well, I'm going to sort of tag on with what Jean-Luc said. I don't think I am the only person here who lived as an adult through both Watergate and the current situation. But I am noticing that there is a speed up in the DOJ's action or view of what happened on January 6th and the importance of bringing judiciary action to bear on this. But remembering how slow it did seem at the time with Watergate, some of which was because we weren't in a 24-hour news cycle. We are now, and everything seems to happen very slowly because we're waiting for that big headline, to happen any minute now. And it doesn't come because the mills of justice grind slowly, but they do grind exceedingly small. So I'm looking forward to seeing some small grinding, people being rendered into small grindings. There's a few that are at the top of that list. I'll let you guess who they are, and we'll just leave it there. But, on the healthcare side, I still think that we have a lot of teaching to do amongst the great American public about how little they really do have when it comes to a reliable healthcare system that will actually help them stay healthy in a pandemic, because despite the fact that we've had vaccines and some people have decided to quote unquote believe science, yay you, what? I did get my bivalent last weekend, the one that's extra for Omicron, the booster. So I'm definitely in the believe science row there. But I just want more of our citizenry to quote unquote believe science. I'm not sure what that means, but to just sort of be one of the group that recognizes that scientific endeavor and scientific discovery is both trustworthy and a good thing for you to get some in your own life. So go get vaxxed. Don't be a dick.
I don't know about the second one, but the first one I'm giving my bivalent on Sunday, so just in time. Michael, close us out.
Well, I'm not as optimistic about the elections because it's, the saying, it's not how much you earn, it's how much you keep. It's not what the public opinion is, it's who gets to vote and whose votes gets counted. And these folks are pretty serious about suppressing the vote and pouring money in and all the rest of that. So I don't doubt what public opinion would be. I kind of doubt and hope that I'm totally wrong about what the vote is. I want to pick up on what Rosemarie said about the ACA. One of the things I've been thinking about is how poorly people who are moderates the moderate Democrats tell the story. And so if you read that Kaiser Health News piece on high healthcare costs, sort of buried in there, as that comes from the high deductibles that the Republicans said are going to make us all better shoppers, except as Casey has showed us, no matter what your deductible is, and as JL said, you can't really shop on quality, and what people do is they just don't get care because the deductible is too high, and there's been no political consequences to the Republicans for that, and that's their constituents. We don't tell that story. And then on the other side, where Bernie Sanders told us, you know what, and others of that ilk. You know what? If we just go to single payer, there's this 10-year transition period where we totally screw up all the hospitals and the insurance companies, but don't worry about it. And imagine if that had been there when we had the pandemic and we were taking away all the jobs from all those other people. And yet here we are. Yes, we have a screwed up system. Nobody doubts that. But we got uninsured down to what, 5%, something like that, with the ACA and things. And what does that tell us? That tells us that we don't need to pretend that someday we're going to be Great Britain, like the fantasy of the people who went to Harvard 20 years ago. And we don't need to be some Ayn Rand fantasy of the people on the right, and we can do a better job. And nobody tells that moderate story. And so that's what I've sort of been thinking about, that the people who are rationally in the middle don't get much credit.
Well, we'll leave it there with rational, moderate rational despair from Michael. You've been listening to the THCB Gang, September the 15th episode. I'm your host, Matthew Holt. We had Jail Neptune from the island of Manhattan, Vince Kuraitis from the wilds of Idaho, Michael Millenson from the solid Midwest or Western city of Chicago, Casey Quinlan from Richmond, Virginia, still defending the Confederacy there, and Rosemarie Day from...
No, I'm not.
She's not, I know, I'm just teasing. Rosemarie Day from Boston, Massachusetts area. Thanks. THCB Gang will be back next Thursday, September the 22nd, before it wanders off for a European vacation, or its host wanders off for a European vacation. We'll figure out how we'll deal with it from there. All right. Thank you very much for listening. Nice to, if you're listening on the podcast or listening on the, or watching on the video, and nice to have you with us, and we'll see you very soon.